All right, so in like I said, in this unit, we're going to be spending our time reviewing each human body system. We'll talk about what that body system does, how it's important for our survival and our health, what some of the organs are of that body system, and then about some possible diseases or disorders or what happens if things aren't working properly with that system. So the human body systems, there's different ways to think about them and break them up. For our purposes, we're going to say that there's 11 body systems that we'll be talking about. And so the one we won't really spend much time on, just mention right now, is this first one, integumentary system. And this is basically our skin, our hair, our nails, basically the covering of our body. And our skin has a lot of different functions. It provides protection, prevents bacteria from getting into our body, to other parts. It's waterproof so that we don't dehydrate very quickly. Yep. It helps get rid of certain waste. We have sweat glands, which get rid of certain types of salts. Also, those sweat glands are important for cooling our body, to maintain our proper body temperature. We have lots of temperature and pressure and pain receptors in our skin that give us sensory information. Also, our skin makes vitamin D when it's exposed to sunlight. So there are lots of different functions of that integumentary system, but we really won't get into any more detail. But we will get into more detail about all the others. So we'll go through this list sort of one by one. Now, some of them are very interrelated. For example, skeletal and muscular system, they are very closely related because they rely on each other. When we talk about circulatory, respiratory system, they all interconnect. But we'll talk about them sort of one at a time. Okay, so we have the skeletal, muscular, nervous system, endocrine, circulatory, lymphatic, respiratory, digestive, excretory, and reproductive systems. So really, if you think about all these various systems, the body systems, their purpose is help maintain homeostasis. Okay? And that's a very important word for you to know. It's a word you're going to see many times as you go through school and take other science courses. Homeostasis is really keeping things in balance, maintaining the proper conditions within our body. That's what homeostasis is. And all of our body systems are important for us to maintain homeostasis, to keep things in balance. So we've talked many times, or several times, about the organization of life, we call it. If you think back to that, what was the simplest level of organization for living things?
Cells.
Cells, which work together and form, what's the next level? Bonnie? Tissues, which work together and form organs, which form, we're one step in between. Organ systems, which form living organisms. And so that's what we're talking about here. So if we think about that organization of life, we had cells, the basic unit of life. Groups of cells work together to do a certain job, and we called them tissues. Different types of muscle tissue, or bone tissue, or nerve tissue. And then several tissues work together, and they form the organs of our body, like our heart, our brain, our lungs, our kidneys, so forth. That's where we're going to be spending a lot of our time this unit, talking about these two levels, organs and organ systems. For each organ system, we will talk about, all right, well, what are some of the organs that make up that system? What do the various organs do? How how do they work together? And those various organs work together, and those are the organ systems. Each organ system has a job to do, a function in the body. Which leads us to our last level, a complete organism. In this case, we're talking about the human body. So our unit is about human body systems. So an organism would be an entire living thing. One human is made of all these organ systems working together. So we're going to begin our unit with the skeletal and muscular system. They're both in this packet of notes. And again, we cover them together because they're very interrelated. So we'll begin with our skeletal system. And I know in health class, you guys have studied the different body systems. And I know you probably had memorized the bones and stuff. So a lot of this is review. That's good. So if you know a lot of this from your health class, it's going to make things easier for you. So what is the purpose of our skeletal system? What do all these bones do, Kayla? Well, there are two things. One is about like support and movement. What about the other thing? Grace? Yeah, that sort of goes along with movements. They give structure to a person. Michael? Yeah, certain bones are very important for protection of vital organs. So those are the two things, protection and support of the body. So the skeletal system includes all the bones. Raise your hand if you remember the number of bones in an adult human. Madison? Yeah, 206 bones in an adult body. They each have names. They have scientific names, often in Latin. We're going to talk about some of the major bones, and you're going to have to memorize them. I know you had to do that also in health, but we'll get to that in a minute. So if we think about the skeletal system, obviously the majority of the skeletal system is the bone. Right? Bones make up the majority of the system. And a bone is a type of tissue. Okay? Bone tissue is made of a calcium compound. It's very hard and durable. But it is a tissue. It has living cells in it. Okay? Sometimes people think it's sort of like dead, but it's not. Bone is living tissue. And inside of the bone is what? So in the center of our bones, there's some area that's not hard bone tissue, but it's made of other stuff. What is it? Yeah, it's called marrow. This bone marrow is very important because this is where blood cells are produced in our body. Blood cells are made within our bones in this central area called the bone marrow. It makes red blood cells, it makes white blood cells. And you may have seen bone marrow, if you're eating chicken wings for dinner or something, if you break the bone, there's in the center of it sort of a soft, squishy area. That's the bone marrow. If you eat like a steak that has the bone still in, and you can see it's like if it's a round bone, the center section is soft, it's high in fat, it's a great source of nutrition. Lots of animals will break open the bones of their prey after they eat the meat off of it to eat the marrow. Because it's rich in fat, high in calories, provides lots of nutrients.
Can we eat it?
Yeah, you could eat it. People eat the bone
tastes
marrow.
like nothing.
Yeah, it's sort of real fatty tissue. Yeah, dogs eat it. Lots of people eat it too. Some people eat the marrow out of those bones. But that's within the bone. Some people also that have certain diseases, especially certain types of cancers, may need a bone marrow transplant where their bone marrow itself is not producing enough white blood cells or healthy blood cells, so they may get a bone marrow transplant from one person to another. So we have the bones and bone marrow. We also have some connective tissue. Now these connective tissues, ligaments, tendons, They kind of link up skeletal and muscular system, but we talk about them under both sections. So ligaments are a tough connective tissue that connects bones together. So like, where would bones have to connect with each other? Charlie? In the joints. In the joints of our body where two bones meet, they're connected. And they're connected by these things called ligaments. It's tough tissue. You can see here in this diagram, what part of a body is this showing? Yeah, this is a knee, and the knee is a very complex joint where you have the femur coming down, you have the kneecap, okay? You have the tibia and the fibula, all sort of connecting, and so they're all held together to form your actual knee joint itself. It's all connected by these strands of ligament. And I would probably guess there's maybe one ligament that you could name. Anybody know the name of a ligament? Yeah, the ACL. So you probably heard of the ACL. Why have you probably heard of it?
Because I know.
Hold on. So yeah, it's a common injury, especially in athletes. An ACL tear is a common sports injury. The ACL is a ligament, anterior cruciate ligament. It's a ligament inside of your knee, sort of. It's back in here. It's one of these ligaments inside of the knee. And it helps stabilize your knee so that that joint allows for the proper range of motion. And if a person is planting and cutting on that knee when they get hit, or if there's an underlying weakness or imbalance in strength, sometimes they can damage that ACL, and they may need surgery and usually a long period of time to recover from that. And so it's an injury, and it's especially one that girls should be concerned about because of differences in male and female anatomy. Girls are much more prone to tearing an ACL than boys are. And so there's certain exercises, flexibility, stretches that you can do to help strengthen the muscles and help prevent that. So it's something that if you're an athlete, you should look into, and the coaches should know a little bit about.
What does an LCL do?
What's that? LCL? I mean MCL?
I've heard of LCL.
I don't know about LCL. MCL, there's just different, they're all different ligaments within the knee. And some are more important, some are more likely to be damaged. So it just depends. But they're all stabilizing ligaments within the knee. All right, so we have ligaments that hold the bones together. And then we have tendons. Do you know what tendons do? Sam?
They hold. They allow for more movement.
They allow for movement because, Zoe? Yes, they connect muscles to bones, which is important, and that is related to movement because, you know, your muscles are what move your bones in different ways. And when your muscle contracts, it pulls on a bone. But in order to pull on that bone, it has to be connected to it in some way, and it's connected through these tendons. Tendons connect our bones to our muscles. Again, I bet there's probably one tendon you can name. Okay?
Achilles?
Yeah, the Achilles tendon, where is it?
Oh, like on the back of your foot?
Yeah, it's basically your heel. You know, if you feel like the back of your foot, it feels like almost a bone, but that's not a bone. Your heel's not a bone back there. That's actually a tendon. It's really strong. They're very tough. And it connects. What does your Achilles tendon connect?
It connects all the muscle.
Well, not all, but the Achilles tendon itself, Karina?
Connects the toes.
No?
Oh.
Tim?
It connects your heel
Yep.
up to your leg.
Connects the bottom of your heel bone, way at the bottom of your foot. There's a bone there. Connects it to your calf muscles in the back of your leg. And so when you contract your calf muscle and it gets shorter, it pulls on your Achilles tendon, which pulls on your heel, which points your toe down. And that's what your Achilles tendon does. It connects your calf muscles to your heel to allow for the movement of your foot. And again, it's very tough and strong. That's why when you feel it, it feels almost like it's a bone back there, but it's a little softer than a bone. That's not bone, that's the tendon. Michael? Yeah, sometimes people get tendonitis. People can rupture their Achilles tendon. And if that happens, then you sometimes can't move your foot properly. Just any movement using your calf muscle is sore or painful. So there's different things that can happen. So,
Isn't there like a thing, like a muscle or something on like the bottom of your foot right here?
yeah, you have all sorts of tendons that make up the bottom of your arch of your heel and ligaments in there. Yeah.
Over the summer, I had like plantar fasciitis.
Yeah, plantar fasciitis. That's when the bottom of your foot, like the arch of your foot, you get pain. I used to have that too. But there's swelling and inflammation that is very painful. Like you wake up in the morning, it hurts really bad, and you get out of bed.
What happens like when you walk for a long time and it like goes like right in the middle?
That probably sounds like it's like plantar fasciitis. Yeah. Yeah, Danny.
My hockey coach showed us a picture of a kid. He was messing around in the locker room and cut his Achilles kind of open.
Oh, really?
He showed us pictures
Yeah.
of it and somebody like fainted him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you rupture or your Achilles tendon gets cut, you can't really move your foot really well. So tendons are what move our bones. Our muscles go on our tendons go on our bones. And you can feel these tendons in various places. You can feel it like in your bicep, where your bicep muscle connects to your forearm. You can feel it if you bend your arm halfway and you feel it in your elbow. That tough thing, that's the tendon. That connects your bicep to your forearm. All right. So as we go on and we talk about our bones, so we sometimes have like what we might call common names for bones, like you might say your skull or your collarbone or your knee. But what you need to know is the more scientific names. And so that's in this list. And again, these are all filled out for you. And I know you've studied them before, but we'll just go over them fairly quickly here. So you might call it your skull, but the technical name is what? Your cranium. And the cranium is one of those protective bones. It protects your brain. Surrounds your brain to protect it. Your collarbone, which you can feel right below your neck on each side. You can put your fingers in there. That collarbone, that's called your clavicle. It's something people commonly can fracture, especially if they're skateboarding or snowboarding or playing sports and they fall. And sometimes if you brace yourself, you can fracture your collarbone, your clavicle. Right in the middle of your chest, big, hard, bony plate in the middle of your chest. That's the sternum. Another protective bone along with the ribs. And those are protective for what? The sternum and ribs. Heart and lungs. Yeah, behind your sternum and within your rib cage are your heart and lungs. And obviously those are vital organs, and so they're protected by those bones. When we look at the arms and legs, they're set up in sort of a similar way. We have one upper bone in our arm or in our thigh, and then the lower part of the limb is made of two bones, in your calf and your forearm. So the upper bone in the arm is the humerus. You have a single bone up in your upper arm. And I guess on this list, the next one here is the vertebrae. So the vertebrae are the bones that make up your spinal column. And they're all separate bones. So this is not a single bone. There's a whole bunch of vertebrae. And they sort of sit one on top of the other. And they allow for movement, but also they're protected because inside there's sort of like a little tunnel that goes through the vertebrae. And what runs through there is your spinal cord. The nerve bundle that brings information from your brain down into all the other parts of your body. So that's protected by your vertebrae. And so it protects them from damage because obviously it's very important.
So that's why if people break a bone right here, that's why they're paralyzed?
Well, they're not going to paralyze if they break the bone. You can break this bone and not be paralyzed. But if they break the spinal cord, if they have an injury in their back and this breaks the spinal cord that goes through it, that's what causes paralysis. So it's not the bone that's the problem, it's the spinal cord that goes through the bone.
And then the information from the
Yes, can't get
Wait,
stuck.
so if you break one disc and then like will they like drop?
No, so the vertebrae are each separate bones, you can see here, and in between each one is a disc, this sort of rubbery disc here. This is a disc of cartilage, and it cushions between each of those bones so that they can glide over each other so they're not pressing bone on bone. Now some people, you may have heard about this maybe with parents or grandparents or relatives, that they have a herniated disc in their back. And what that means is there's damage to this cartilage, and therefore it may be bone on bone, it may be painful. It may not allow them to move well. Sometimes these discs bulge out and press on these nerves, and that causes pain or causes sciatica, or their leg falls asleep, causes a bunch of different problems. But those are issues with these discs. Scoliosis is just sort of like an abnormal growth in the spinal cord where there's some curvature of the spine. The person may wear a brace to help correct that. And they'll check, like if you go to the doctor for your annual visit and they ask you like bend over, stand straight, and the doctor looks at your back and they feel along your spinal column. They're looking to see if everything is straight, because sometimes the person, it can start to curve or bend forward, and they may have to do corrective measures. Yeah.
Is it possible for kids to get a herniated disc?
Yeah, it could be. It's possible. Yep, David.
The school nurse list, you said he had scoliosis, so then my dad took me to the doctor and it sounds fine.
Yeah, they may just do like a quick evaluation, you know, if you're going for a quick checkup, and they may send you a specialist to check it out, and it may or may not be. All right, we got to get moving here. Kayla, one last question?
My cousin has scoliosis. She got a metal pole.
Yeah, sometimes people have to have surgery, like serious surgery, depending on how bad it is and if it's getting worse and worse. Yep, they correct it in different ways. All right, so in the forearm, so your forearm, you have two bones, the ulna and the radius. You can actually, if you grab on like your forearm and then twist your hand, you can feel the two bones in there sort of rotate. One's on one side, one's on the other. You can feel them in there as they move around. So there's two bones. The one that's on the thumb side, so if you hold your hand out, the one that's on the thumb side, that's called the radius. And the one on your pinky side over here, that's called the ulna. Sometimes people get confused as to which is which. The way I tell people to remember, like your thumb can rotate like in a complete circle more than your other fingers, just like a circle has a radius. Okay, so your thumb side, that's the radius, and the pinky side is the ulna. Pinky has an N in it, so does ulna. So that's one way to help you remember that. The pelvis is basically the hip bones, called the pelvic girdle sometimes. It's these large bones here. They provide a place for your vertebrae to attach, where your leg, your femurs attach. It basically allows us to get our upright posture that we have. The pelvis. The extension of the pelvis, you might call it the tailbone. That's called the sacrum. Okay, the name for that's the sacrum. Something, you know, you could bruise if you fall on it or something like that. It's really painful.
Oh, like why do we have a tailbone? We don't have a tail.
It's just a part of it. It's just an extension.
So we have a tail?
No, because it's internal. But if I guess, sort of the remnant.
And would it like stick out and have a tail?
Yeah.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I would like to.
All right, Jada, quickly.
I'm playing baseball.
I
I slid on the third base, and I landed like flat on it. Then I woke up the next day, like my butt down the middle of my thigh was bruised.
Yeah. Yeah, my daughter, one time we were sledding, took her sledding at the parkway, and she was going down, and she had a huge jump and landed, and she was crying. This was when she was like 7 or 8 years old, and I told her, oh, you're fine, you just get up and go again, but it turned out she broke her tailbone.
You're so nice.
Wow.
She still brings it up all the time.
Wait, have you tried it out? Is it gone?
I don't know. No, it's just for, and like even sometimes if we go on like a really long car ride, we drive to South Carolina, and she's sitting a long time, sometimes it still is painful. Sorry.
Is that really nice? You're so mean.
Yeah, I thought she didn't really get hurt.
Whoa, she's crying.
All right, moving on. If we look at the leg,
This is similar to
all our legs are set up similar to our arms. All right, guys. Our legs, we have one upper leg bone, the femur. It's the largest bone in the body. It's your thigh bone. And then the lower leg is made of, just like our forearm, two separate bones. The larger one, the shin bone, is the tibia. The smaller one on the calf side is the fibula. Madison, stop, please. And then the kneecap, it's not on the skeleton as I have a kneecap, but the kneecap is called the patella. And so those are the parts. Those are the bones that you should know. Hopefully you know a lot of them already.
What are our finger bones?
Phalanges and all different organs. All right, so I'm going to show you just another diagram. I'll quiz you on it maybe tomorrow. Just not a real quiz. Just a review. All right, so our last topic we need to get to today are joints. So like I said earlier, a joint is a place where two bones connect, where two bones meet, and they're held together, like we said, by those ligaments that connect it all together, keep it in place. And we have a few different types of joints in our body. We'll talk about some of these. One is a hinge joint. A hinge joint is a joint where there's only movement in one sort of plane of motion, a single direction. And it comes from, just like on a door, we have hinges. So these metal brackets here on the door, these are hinges. And what they do is they allow this door to swing open, but it only can move in one way. It only moves this way. You can't lift the door up this way. You can't tilt it forward. It just swings like this. So what joints in our body move like that? Marley? Yeah, your elbow. Your elbow allows your forearm to bend and just in a single direction. Your knee is another one. If your joints are set up correctly, it should only move in a single direction. If it's moving side to side, that's not going to mean there's... You can, but so like, same thing with my hand. I can move my hand like this, but am I moving my elbow? No, I'm moving my shoulder. So this joint at my elbow only allows up and down motion.
I can do it.
And so that's the reason it does that. It's because of the shape of the bones. The way that the bones fit together, there's sort of a groove in the humerus, okay? And then the radius sort of fits into that groove so that it only moves that one way. A ball and socket joint allows for a wider range of motion. A ball and socket joint allows for 360 degrees of rotation. So this is the femur, obviously, I took out of the skeleton. So you can see the top of the femur has this sort of ball-like projection onto it. It fits into a socket in the hip here, and that allows it to sort of move in lots of different directions because it has that round shape. It can pivot. Now, it can't move all the way to the back, obviously, but that's like your shoulder. You can move your shoulder this way, up and down. Your shoulder and your hip can move in lots of different directions. So those are ball and socket joints. Now, a couple other joints. The gliding joint is a joint in which the bones are sort of on top of each other. Okay? And they sort of slide on top. A good example of that is in the vertebrae. They're stacked one on top of the other, but they can move on top of each other and slide and pivot. Another example, our wrists and our fingers are made of a series of very complex gliding joints. One thing, Michael, I just want to finish this last one and I'll answer your question. The final one is called the fixed joint, and this is a place where bones meet, but there's no movement. The bones are basically fused together. If you look at the cranium, it's actually made of several bones, but during infancy, they grow together and they fuse together, so there's no movement. And if you had a baby brother, cousin, or uncle or something, you might see that a newborn baby in the top of their head, if they're bald, they have a little soft spot where those bones haven't fully fused together yet. It eventually closes up, but it takes a little while.